Hey, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Trend Report. I'm glad you're joining us today. We have another returning guest that I am confident is going to drop all types of wisdom and knowledge on us. So be sure you listen in to our guest today, Amanda Schneider. Hey, Amanda, how are you?
Good. Good morning, Sid.
Welcome back. This is number two.
It is number two. And I was listening to your podcast with Rob Kirkbride the other day. And so I just want to say if Rob gets a jacket for returning, like I want the same
Okay.
SNL jacket.
I think I can make that happen. Rob did not get a jacket, but I'm going to have to come up with something like that if we have people coming back over and over again. But I do have a sticker. So I made a deal with Rob, and he didn't live up to his end of the deal. Rob, if you're listening, I didn't see the Instagram post. But I have a sticker that says, I'm a trend reporter. I will mail you a sticker, but here's the deal. You just got to post it on social media. Like tag me on Instagram that you're a trend reporter, okay?
Love it.
Oh my gosh. It's a lot of fun. I'm glad to have you back. But I know you and a lot of our listeners know you, but for people that are listening that haven't met you yet, please take a moment and introduce yourself. Tell us who you are and what you do.
Perfect. So, hello, everyone. I'm Amanda Schneider, founder and president at ThinkLab. And ThinkLab, if you're not familiar, is the research division of Sandow Design Group, sister company to Interior Design, Metropolis, Lux, and so many other companies. So basically, my job is to leverage the reach of all of those great media brands to research this crazy industry we know and love and bring you insights. So kind of removing assumptions, replacing them with facts.
And you guys have been really busy because your Think Lab at Sandow is a young company. I mean, what, 3 or 4 years?
We are young as part of Sandow.
Yes.
So I founded the company in 2011. We officially incorporated in 2015. We effectively doubled our revenue year over year, every year, save one, until ultimately we were acquired by Sandow in 2018, really based on some of our work that we did with the CBRE Furniture Forum that many of
Right.
your listeners may be familiar with. So we've been part of Sandow Design Group since November of 2018. So now 3.5, almost 4 years in to that acquisition.
That's great. And you guys have grown, you've got added lots of team members and you've expanded, and we're going to talk about research and the things that you do. But before we do that, let's talk about your podcast because you host an amazing podcast that shares tons of information, and you've completed 3 seasons, and I've listened to all of them, and I absolutely love the third season. It's my favorite. I told you that. And so tell us a little bit about how you got started with Design Nerds Anonymous.
Sure. So we actually started our first season of the podcast. I want to say it was in 2020,
Hmm.
amidst the lockdowns of the pandemic. And our goal was really to start to share some of our insights and research via an audio format. And like you said, I'm a big podcaster. So our tagline for Design Nerds Anonymous is really around the intersection of business and design. So we try to kind of create insights that really focus on the broader ecosystem around the A&D community. So architects, designers, but also commercial real estate, product manufacturers, product distributors. So we are about to launch our fourth season of Design Nerds Anonymous. Again, each of those seasons is now built upon what we call a hackathon. And our fourth season, I am beyond excited about, starts dropping October 6th, 2022. And that will really cover some insights around the industry's first ever persona study. So one of our passions
Ooh.
as a research firm is really taking things that maybe the consumer realm does that's kind of normal business on that
Mhm.
side of the world and bring them to our industry that is just not used to having research. So we did that around neocon with a secret shopper study, and now this latest hackathon did it with a persona study. So season 4, again launching October 2022, will really be around starting to drip some of these insights from our personas that are specific to our B2B world.
Okay, that is so good. And I got some questions about that. But congratulations on completing 3 seasons and launching season 4. And your setup of your podcast is a lot different. You launch once or twice a year, but they're like 8 episodes right at a time, and you drop them 8 weeks in a row, and then you hang out, do some more research, and then you come back later. Unlike mine, that my season, if you will, is a year because we drop an episode every other week. But what I love about podcasting is you get to do it your way.
Exactly. And we actually have 3 different podcasts now, as you know.
Yep.
So we kind of tailor the format to the content and the message. So Design Nerds Anonymous, again, was our inaugural podcast that is really 30 minutes of action-packed information. So one of the reasons we do it in season is to give us the time to really think it through, curate the guests. So yeah, that typically launches once or twice a year. We also just launched the industry's first ever CEU podcast, which allows designers to learn on the go. We're all Zoom fatigued yet connection starved. So
Mm-hmm.
this actually, you can earn microcredits through AIA and IDCEC. So where Design Nerds Anonymous is focused on the whole ecosystem, the learning objective, which is hosted by Meredith Campbell on my team, is actually really focused on those designers, whether they want CEU credits or not. And then we actually just launched our 3rd podcast most recently, called Empowered. So this one is brought to you by Material Bank. So we've partnered with our cousin company. So they're owned by the same parent company, but separate divisions. So it's brought to you by Material Bank, but created by ThinkLab. And each of those episodes are very short form. So that is a weekly podcast, but they're only 5 minutes long.
Yeah.
It's really focused on empowering that B2B rep with ThinkLab insights. So each episode has answers one key question with a key ThinkLab stat and 3 actionable ideas to really change that rep's behavior. And one of the reasons we're so excited about that is we believe data is only as valuable, as creating the insights, but beyond creating the insights is empowering those who can leverage it to make a difference. So Erica Weinberg hosts that one on my team and is doing a phenomenal job. So any reps that are listening in, we'd invite you to tune into that one as well.
I'm going to go check that out. And we're going to make sure that in the show notes that we link all 3 of your podcasts so people have a quick access to them in the Design Nerds Anonymous, sorry for the slip there. We will link the most current episode for you there. So all that'll be there, easy access. But you said a couple of things that I want to kind of go back to. And I love the focus of season 4. Excited to listen to it. But for those people that may not understand the terminology that you used, will you define persona? Will you explain what a persona is? I know what it is, but people listening may not.
Absolutely. And we have a whole episode. The very first episode
Good.
that's launching is going to explain what a persona is. And really, there's a lot of misperceptions around personas. Some people think a persona is a role, like a facility manager. Some people think it's a demographic, like this is a Gen Zer. You can create personas around them, but typically they lack the depth that you need about how your client makes decisions. So building on our previous hackathons, our previous season of the podcast, this was really around crafting the phygital journey. And the idea that, and for anyone who's not familiar with that term, phygital, it's a really ugly word for this blending of kind of human interaction and digital tools to create an ideal experience with your brand. So our theory going into this most recent hackathon, and again, you'll hear it referenced in the podcast, was that phygital journey, that ideal balance between digital tools and human elements are different by different personas. So we started with some kind of interview style research, some mapping with a lot of our core constituents, including, the whole ecosystem, architects, designers, end users. For this one was a really important element as well.
Yep.
And we really discovered some early on theories that, while some would never give their contact information up to a chatbot, like I don't want my name on those lists, like I would never do it. I'm going to peck around a website for hours versus someone like me that's like, get my information to that chatbot because I want to talk to a human, like I'm not wasting my time. Was the idea of really personalizing these journeys across human and digital, but also across human remote. We're getting so much more accustomed to remote service. That could be a FaceTime call. It could be a Zoom call. It could be, kind of synchronous with a human, but maybe not in the physically the same place. And digital, where someone is really self-serving and finding the information they need.
Okay, that's awesome. I'm excited to listen to that as you dive into it and see what all you came up with as it relates to the personas in our industry. So that's exciting. But you've said the word probably 4 times already. So let's go back even a little bit further and tell us what a hackathon is. And as you're describing it, I would love to also know how you came up with the concept to use the hackathon as one of the core elements of your research.
Absolutely. So we actually started the hackathon that wasn't even called a hackathon. Again, as I mentioned in my intro, many of your listeners are probably familiar with some of the work that we did around the CBRE Furniture Forum. So the hackathon term is something that's often used by tech companies, maybe software programmers, to really hack a complex, hairy problem in a short amount of time. And we adapted that first with the Furniture Forum. And then when the world fell apart in 2020, we really kind of put that process back on steroids. It was to look at some of these industry problems that we have, some of the biggest, hairiest challenges, and leverage our reach and influence to bring the right people to the table to help solve those problems. So our first hackathon kicked off in 2020. That was like, oh my God, we're a very analog, very face-to-face industry. And all of a sudden, we can't see people amidst the pandemic. So we did a hackathon about the future of the B2B selling process. And that resulted in 100 ideas for sales reps that are struggling to kind of adjust in this digital era. Not to say we want to stay here, but to say that the future will probably be a balance of the world we knew pre-pandemic and, the one we experimented with. The second hackathon, which is your favorite season of the podcast, was really looking at some of the historical places that manufacturers have invested. And I think one of the challenges is in this increasingly digital era is we can't invest in everything. We can't keep doing binders and samples and all of the physical things and, all of the time with the reps and all these new digital tools. So how do we help them kind of reassess where their investments are? So as you know, that resulted in another playbook of 100 different ideas for investing in things like showrooms and samples and events and kind of what the future of that looks like. And then fast forward to this one, where we started out almost with a different premise than we ended with. We said, what's it really going to take to get ahead? Like, how can brands stand out? Because this digital world is a flattener and it's getting tougher and tougher. And in some ways, we have to fight against that commoditization because our industry is all about creativity. Yep. And that's where we ended with this persona study to really say, think about the journey of your clients from their point of view, not the point of view of your brand, and to really help craft these journeys in a very unique light. And if you're interested, I can give you a little more preview than that, but that's kind of where we started. So a hackathon, go ahead.
Well, I think that's a perfect tease actually, because we could do a whole episode about just that right there.
Yeah.
But I had a question for you. So in your hackathons, what you're doing, just for clarity, is you're bringing a diverse group of people together, sometimes in a physical room, or sometimes maybe you're doing it on Zoom, or I'm not sure all the process there, but you're bringing them together and you're posing a question or a challenge. And so basically it's like a big brainstorm where you're seeking information from everybody. And it's people in all aspects of our industry, not just one specific vertical, if you will, right?
Absolutely. And let me break it down to make it sound a little simpler than I just did. Sure. So phase one is really around exploration. So what we're looking for is problems and challenges from a variety of viewpoints. So that tends to be typically over Zoom. We do a lot of mapping and tools like Miro to really map where there's pain, because to us, where there's pain, there's opportunity. Yep. Phase two, if you will, takes those pain points and validates it with a much broader audience. So this last time, I think we had about 850 survey responses. The time before that, it was over 1,200. So, depending on the topic and, the interest of the survey and things like that, phase two is really getting broader data points. And then phase three is the funnest, what we typically call generative research. And that is where we say, okay, if these are the problems validated by these theories that came from phase one and this, evidence that came from phase two, how do we solve that? And that's where we get really creative. We often mix up the groups to really say, how do we solve these problems? And the result of these hackathons is always an idea book of really actionable, tangible things. These are not theories. It's to say, here's what you and your brand can do.
Okay, that is so cool. And those books are available on your website, correct? You can have access to all of that. Okay.
Yeah, and we'll get you that link to put into the show notes, but it's thinklab.design/design hackathon. And you can find out how to join into our next one that's coming up in 2023, or how to get some of the insights from our past hackathons.
That's awesome. Research and data informs decisions moving forward. And it really helps businesses if you're paying attention, if you're listening to people like you that are doing the research. It can help inform decisions, whether it's strategy decisions, product decisions, market decisions, so many people decisions that are available. But out of all these that you've been doing, 3 of them so far, and another one coming up, is there one takeaway that you're like, whoa, this was so good that this is the top takeaway out of all of them, or can you even narrow it down that way?
Well, let me start with just one of my favorite quotes based on
Okay.
what you were just saying. And one of my favorite quotes is, "It's easy to be surrounded by data, yet starved for insights." And I love that quote because I think that's so common, and really as a research firm, I can tell you, I've been told not to say this publicly, but you can make research kind of say whatever you want it to say, right? In this day and age, whether we're talking politics or pandemic or whatever else, we know that we don't always trust research today. So I want to take that kind of a step further, is to say that we want to not only collect that data, translate it to insights, but also give you ideas and let you kind of choose your own adventure for what you want to take and apply to your brand. So if I had to say, I can I do one for each? I think that would
Yeah,
be easier for
absolutely.
me.
One for each are great.
So, okay. So from the first hackathon, I would say our key discovery was really around this phygital journey, that you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. Once we went from almost this wholly analog industry to this temporarily wholly digital industry, we believe the future is going to be about this phygital journey. The second one, a key finding, was we mapped all of the traditional places that manufacturers specifically have historically invested pre-pandemic, and then at that time, kind of during or somewhat, I don't know if we're post yet, but and one of our key insights was there's almost nothing in this industry that's not going to touch digital in some way. That could be as simple as, a binder and taking that online, or a showroom and having QR codes that interact with digital. So it was really looking at how do we stop fighting that and embrace it, and not just take the things that we would do in person and put them on a digital platform. I often laugh at you remember the pricers that used to, we took a book that you would reference and then we physically put it online and even made the whoosh noise when you
Yep.
turn the pages. It was not optimized for digital. So we're going to have to rethink those things to optimize it for digital.
Okay.
And then for hack 3, again, which has been my favorite so far, it's really while we did uncover 10 universal truths across all 5 personas that said, no matter what, these things are true in our industry. But those 5 personas want very different phygital journeys. And I would estimate today that 2 of those 5 are very traditional, and probably personas that would sound very traditional if I describe them to you right now in our industry. We estimate that those 2 personas make up about 60% of our sample today, but 40% of those, I would argue, are the other 3, where I think our industry is grossly underserving. And those tend to be the heavier audiences with Gen Z, and Gen Z is going to be 27% of the workforce by 2025, which is not far away. So I think it gives us a lot of clues as to how we can get our brands and our tools and our reps ready for what's to come.
Okay. That's so good. And I especially love the last point about Gen Z and the changing demographic of the buyer, because they are changing. And every aspect of our industry needs to understand that the buyer is evolving. And the buyer that is in my age bracket, or the one older than me, we won't say what they're called because I will date myself, but we do things differently. And then those coming behind us are doing things a lot differently. And then if you watch Gen Z and what Gen Z is doing, just look out. They're a crazy bunch. I mean
Yep,
that very
yep.
positively, but they're a crazy bunch.
Well, and it's not going to surprise you that our next hackathon is actually diving into Gen Z in a big way. So this
Okay.
kicks off January 2023.
Okay.
And, one of the interesting things as I'm diving into the broad research that exists around Gen Z is that, millennials was the first generation to have skill sets from a technological standpoint that their predecessors, the previous generations, did not.
Mhm.
It's one reason we've heard so much about the millennial generation. And I think a lot of that we heard kind of in a negative light. But the reason it was so impactful is that they were mentoring up, they were teaching and impacting the other generations. And there were quite a few in the workforce at that time,
Yep.
more than any other generation before. And Gen Z will be the same. So we are studying Gen Z, not because we want to profile. And if you read anything about Gen Z, they hate that we put them in a group and we're trying to describe them with all these labels. But again, I'm interested in Gen Z because I want to see this ripple up effect that
Mhm.
is going to influence everyone in our industry, not just what do they want. Because if you ask a Gen Zer how they're different, they probably can't tell you because they haven't been in this industry like we have for the
True.
number of decades or years that we have. So my interest in Gen Z is looking at that ripple up effect and how they can teach us where the future might head.
Mhm. So, what I think is important about this is understanding how the buyer is changing. And then you're tying it into something you said earlier that we really haven't talked about, which is the customer experience or the buyer's journey and what they go through every time they touch you. And when I say touch you, I'm meaning they touch your business. And whether you're a small manufacturer, a small A&D firm, or a multi-million dollar, one of the top 5 A&D firms, or one of the top 5 furniture brands or carpet brands or whatever kind of brand you are, the customer's touching you at every aspect. So they're touching you on the social platforms, and you need to know what that experience is like. They're touching you on the website, and they're touching you in articles they're reading about you, and they're touching you every time they Google something that they're coming up. And you've got to understand the journey they go on. And the example that I say to people, and I said this actually this morning, I was in a clubhouse room this morning. We were talking about this very topic of customer experience. And I encourage business leaders to go be the customer. Go to the website and walk through the process, look for information, try to contact somebody, and think of it as the lens of not looking at how pretty your website is or how much data is there, information is there. Look at it from the user experience, because I believe that, to me, the website is the place you want to get them to so that they can engage with you, right? And so many times, I think in our industry, we just don't pay attention to that enough.
I would absolutely agree. And I think you brought up something. If I had to pick one insight, I think I've got it from what you just
Okay.
said, is I think that the biggest shift that's happened, especially over the last few years, is one, as we look at past, present, and future. So our industry really has historically been built on relationships. And I would argue with relationships as currency. If
Mm-hmm.
you think about why, especially on the rep front, why most reps are hired into the industry, it's because of their relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I will never say that's not important or won't be important moving forward. But if you look at during the pandemic, what happened, I would argue that information trumped relationships as that currency. Think about it. I might love to hang out with you, Sid, and golf or drink beer or whatever it else is that we do. But I'm not going to do that with you over Zoom. So if you had information that helped me do my job, especially amidst so much change, everyone wanted to know what's everybody else doing, right? What's happening out there? So I think for that temporary period, information trumped relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And again, you can't put that toothpaste back in the tube. So I think we've all had kind of this shared experience. And I think everyone's, hoping that things go back to normal. But I believe that the future will be about exactly what you're talking about, this experience as currency. And
Mm-hmm.
that experience, to your point, is going to involve everything from social to customer service to your reps to your website. And if it's not consistent across those, especially as we look at Gen Z, that is going to result in a deficit of authenticity from
Mm-hmm.
your brand that makes your brand less trustworthy. So trust is at the center of all of those things. But how we build trust tomorrow will be different than how we built trust yesterday.
I'm just going to say, I cannot wait to go back and listen to what you just said, because it is gold. Because we walked us through, as an industry holistically, we're relationship built. Then in the early 2020s, we transitioned into information. And let's be clear, information is content. It's the content you're putting out there, whether that is a blog, a video, information on your website, case studies, whatever it is, that's content, which is information. And then you're leading us into the experience that people have with us. And I thought it was just a perfect flow of what has really been happening in the world since, let's call it 2020, 2019. And that really started to see that shift. The problem that I see with it, Amanda, is so many business leaders are resistant to this change. And you're interviewing a lot of them, you're seeing a lot of them. Why do you feel they are resistant to this change and evolution that's happening in front of them?
Well, I want to go back to that idea of authenticity, because I think authenticity requires a certain level of vulnerability that many of us are not comfortable with. And I can't tell you how many presentations that I leave with brands or clients or others that say, oh my God, it's so great because you just confirmed everything that we're doing. And I feel like when I hear that I've missed, that I haven't been heard, because I feel like we often joke that we leverage research, like the friend who tells you have broccoli in your teeth, right? Like, it doesn't always feel good. Sometimes it's a little bit embarrassing, right? But if we really do our job, you're going to have that vulnerable moment where you find an opportunity. And, we often look for pain points, because those pain points, those frustrations, they do mean opportunity to us, and it means you can improve something. We fight that today, because we often joke that in selling research in an industry that is not used to having a lot of data is often like selling, counseling services. That if you need them, we can help you. But if we try to sell you counseling services when you don't know you need them, like Sid, you need some mental help, it's a little bit offensive, right? So I guess I would challenge everyone listening to really think about, if you're walking through those customer journeys like Sid just described, and you're going to your website, are you just looking for compliments, or are you looking for those pain points? Your teams are great. We know that everyone's doing the best that they can. But I think it's going to be those humble companies that can really look at themselves through the lens of the customer with an honest view to say, I may be great here, but here's where I can improve. Those are the companies that are going to get ahead in this next era. And especially as we look at this changing client, this younger generation, these younger generations coming in, and that ripple up effect, that authenticity is going to be more important in the future than ever.
That is so good. And it brings me to something I heard a guy say this morning, actually, in this clubhouse room that I was in. He does, he's got some kind of AI business where he's doing something, bringing solutions together. I don't know exactly what it was, but it has to do with the automobile industry. And he was working with an automobile dealer, and he said to the dealership, and he got that dealership to do this. There was a customer in their showroom, and they said, hey, listen, we know you're not here right this minute to buy a car, but would you go on our website and go through the process of buying a car while we observe? And the takeaways from all of the challenges at every step of the way, that this happened or that happened, as simple as that blankety blank blank, join, subscribe our email box, that the email list that takes up the entire screen 2 seconds after you land on the page. Those are the kinds of things that you learn when you go explore your website, and just as the example, from the customer perspective, not from your perspective.
Absolutely. And one of my favorite sayings is that it's hard to see the label on your own jar. When you're inside a company, you can't always get that outsider viewpoint. So whether it's, what you just described of going and doing it yourself, or, it's a lot of the research that we do, we call it validation, is we'll take your web experience, we'll take your product, and we will help you be a fly on the wall to hear your core clients, your core constituents really look at that thing, be it a product, a service, a website, an experience from their point of view. Because we often say they're not going to tell you your baby's ugly, but they'll tell me your baby's ugly. So it's really giving you an opportunity to kind of see what others are seeing about you anyway. Again, back to that broccoli in the teeth, to help you fix it.
Well, and something you just said there, I think is really important to remember. They're not going to come and tell you that they struggled with your website. They're going to leave. They're going to bounce. And so your bounce rate, if you're paying attention to your Google Analytics, your bounce rate is going to go through the roof. but who they're going to tell is their friend who is shopping for something very similar to what they bought. And they're going to say something along the lines of, oh, I had a great experience at this company. Oh, or I had a horrible experience at this company. And then why? And guess what's going to happen? They just influence the decision of that referral, if you will, because that's word of mouth referral that brings business into you. They influence that person's decision to either go to your website or not go to your website, just as the example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree with that.
All right, so I have no idea how long we've been talking, but I have a couple more questions. So,
We're
um,
good.
okay, good. So, um, I talk a lot about challenges in our industry, and I see the industry from a very linear perspective. I see it from the furniture side because that's who I am. I've always been in the furniture side of the business. Though I have experienced the other sides of the business, I'm not as knowledgeable of that as well, right? So, but as you said, as somebody that's seeing all aspects of the industry, Amanda, what do you think our industry's biggest challenge or struggle is at this current moment?
That's a great question. So, first of all, I'll say I come from contract and I come from furniture myself as a founder, and the early days of ThinkLab. Since being acquired by Sandow Design Group, we now we're working with commercial and residential. We're working with furniture. We're working with flooring, lighting, you name it. Pretty much every product category, and it's fascinating to kind of expand my personal view into all of these other realms. And I would say there's certain categories that are ahead on certain pieces of this and behind on other pieces of this. But if I had to say kind of where everyone is struggling right now, I would say it's really around figuring out where to invest smartest for the future. And I think everyone's trying to explore these digital tools, but also terribly afraid of losing the human element that has been so instrumental and core to everything that our industry is about. So I want to cite a recent article by McKinsey that I thought was just fascinating. And we often love to kind of parallel the stats that we're looking at that are very specific to the industry to outside sources. So the title of the article is "The Future of B2B Sales is Hybrid." And we actually interview one of the key researchers on this upcoming season of the podcast. So there's even more on that podcast that's not in the article. But she says some very core things. She said that it's not shifting, no longer shifting, it's shifted. One of the things they talk about there is, as we look at the future of B2B sales, that the future of B2B sales will follow something that they call the rule of thirds. So a third of your time, face to face, in person, I think we all agree. Nothing compares to the value of face to face. Yet today, we're all struggling with less of it. The second piece of that is a digital service. So still with a human, but like over Zoom, phone calls, things that are still and human service, but maybe we're a little more comfortable with after coming off the last couple of years of more digital service. So quick question, quick answer, something I don't have to fly across the country to do. I'm going to do that remotely. And then the third is completely digital service, right? So this is maybe asynchronous, maybe a video, maybe something where I can go to your website and find pricing, whatever it is. So a third human in person, a third human remote, and a third self-serve. And one of the other things that article says is that 92% of B2B companies feel that their post-pandemic sales model is more effective than their pre-pandemic model, or I should say their current sales model is more effective than their pre-pandemic model. In our measures of this industry, I would say the most positive companies are hovering somewhere in the 50s, saying that 50% of their sellers feel it's more effective. Other ThinkLab data says while the average rep spent 70 to 80% of their time face-to-face pre-pandemic, today that number is still around the 30 to 35 range. So it's definitely shifted. And if you look at that 30 to 35 range, it's right in that third that McKinsey talks about. So our research is paralleling what the rest of the world is saying, yet our industry is struggling much more, maybe because of the tactile nature of fabrics, finishes, furniture, kicking the tires, things like that, or maybe because we don't have all of those digital tools in place. So I think back to the biggest challenge, I think is just helping brands figure out, where to invest the smartest
Mhm.
and helping our sales reps evolve. There's things we don't want to change, that we do want to go back to quote unquote normal, but there are things that we're going to have to kind of rethink for the future.
So, where to invest in digital is really where do you invest money into your digital journey? And that can be a variety of different things. It could be this is a digital journey. A podcast is a digital journey because you're consuming it either in your ear while you're doing something on a podcast player, or you're consuming it on YouTube. It's digital, correct? And so,
Mhm.
where do you invest? Does a brand need a podcast? That's a really great question. Does a brand need some other kind of digital platform? And then, more importantly, how are they empowering their people with the tools and resources? Because to tie back to the relationship that we talked about, and specifically to LinkedIn. A few weeks ago, I had Joshua B. Lee, who is with the owner of Standout Authority. He and his wife and their business, all they do is help businesses with LinkedIn. That's it. And he talks about the power of LinkedIn, and 4 out of 5 decision makers are on the platform, and that the people on LinkedIn have higher education rates. They've been through more school. They make more money. They're more knowledgeable and affluent, if you will, and why you need to be there. But he's talking from the perspective of why you, as the individual representing your brand, needs to be the person creating the content, not just the brand creating the content. Because to tie it all the way back to the beginning, people do business with people. Relationships are still important. They still want to know who you are. So brands finding out how to invest or give their salespeople or arm them with tools to go be digital is also really important.
It really is. And I think it really is important to start to customize that journey. Another stat that I heard recently is the average B2B project has gone from 2 decision makers to as many as 14. Think about it. It used to be the CEO, CFO, if we're talking about workplace, for example. Now you've got CEO, CFO, CIO, you've got your HR people, with all the hybrid remote work, you've got a ton of other people. And, I happened the day I heard that stat, I was on the phone with Nelson, and they were saying, oh my God, Amanda, that's so true, because they had 12 decision makers on some of these forward thinking trends presentations that they happened to be doing that day. That was all those different roles that we mentioned.
Yeah.
So it's not enough to customize for the company, because each of those individuals within that company probably have different ways that they want to interact. So again, not to bring it back to us, but that's why I love this persona research so much, because it really says, how do we think like 5 different people think? I often say a fish doesn't know it's in water, they just swim, right? And so it's very easy for us to assume that the way I want to interact is the way that everyone around me wants to interact, not unlike my little boy who wants to buy Pokemon cards for dad for his birthday, because that's what I would want. Sure, that's what he would want.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why these personas are so valuable. Not to say because you're persona 1, you can never interact with tools for 2, 3, 4, and 5, but to help our marketing teams, to help our strategy teams that are investing in a lot of these tools, really create the tools for all 5 different personas. But just like you in your life as a consumer, there may be days you're more in a hurry, so you just want to interact on chat while you're on a super boring phone call or conference call, right? And other days you're going to call customer service. Other days you might have the patience or the time to sift through and find an answer on a website. And I think a lot of the answers that I've given are kind of B2C related, but I don't think that we can underestimate the impact of our increasingly frictionless buying journeys as consumers when we go to work. And there's a great little meme that has been shared around our team quite a bit that says, imagine if B2B companies shared, or if B2C companies, shared information like the average B2B website. So imagine you're buying a protein bar, and do you want to know the calories in this protein bar? Like, sign up for this webinar to find out. Does it contain peanuts? Click here to talk to an expert. And we laugh at that. But if you look at many of the companies in our industry, this is the way that we still interact. So I think last season of the podcast, we interviewed Carvana, and there was just a wealth of insights that we could take from them that I think do apply to this industry. This season, we've interviewed Zappos,
Yeah.
someone who leads their customer service department, to just say, hey, what might we learn from this? And,
Hmm.
I think you may say some of those things are not for me. That's okay. But I will guarantee there's some things that you should be considering that maybe you haven't yet.
Hmm. So Carvana episode probably number 3 or number 4 in season 3.
Mhm.
Go listen to it. It is so good to hear them talk about what they're doing. And funny enough, literally 2 days ago, I'm driving past a new Carvana being built not too far from me, because you see it's a huge, basically it's a tall straight building full of glass. And I'm like, oh, that's Carvana. But I literally at the same time I thought about you because of that particular episode, because it is so very good and packed with great information. And now you got another one coming up, and bringing the outside perspective in, I think, is always something that you guys have done an amazing job at highlighting for us. And Amanda, I could literally talk to you for another hour, because I think we've been talking for almost an hour. And to my listeners, this went long, but I knew it was going to go long because Amanda is just a walking encyclopedia of information to help our industry, which is great. And I appreciate you sharing. So before we wrap up, Amanda, tell us a little bit about the future. Give us a glimpse into the future of ThinkLab, or maybe your thoughts about the future of the industry.
Absolutely. And I think the thing that I am most excited about is, I guess definitely I would invite you to listen to the podcast that we talked about so much, Design Nerds Anonymous, and our season 4 launching in October. But also, if you want to get more deeply involved in our research, our next hackathon kicks off technically in January 2023, although my team and I are putting all the preparations in place right now. And whether you're a designer that wants to take part in that, of any generation, we are not discriminatory, even though we're saying it's focused on Gen Z. Again, it's all around that ripple up effect. So we'll be comparing all generations and leveraging those insights to help us all do better. Or whether you're a brand that really says, I want a seat at the table. And this one, different than any others, is going to be really looking at how we can impact the industry, whether you're an A&D firm, commercial real estate, manufacturer, distributor. There will be insights in here for you about how to recruit, retain, and connect with the next generation, and the influence that generation is going to have on our broader industry. So if you're interested in getting involved, I would encourage you to check out our website, thinklab.design/hackathon. And we'd love to have, more involvement at the table, because I think when we get the collective passion of the industry behind the research that we're doing, it just makes it, all the more relevant and impactful.
Awesome. So to everybody listening, that link is in the show notes. Click it and go sign up for the hackathon. At some point in the process, you can be surveyed, you can participate in it, go sign up. There's absolutely nothing wrong with, and I would actually compel you, each of you, to share your voice and to share your thoughts with Amanda and her team to help inform the research and to help, honestly, help move our industry forward. That's why I do what I do. That's why Amanda and her team do what they do. We're about moving the industry forward. So go ahead.
I would agree. If I can just add one more
Yeah.
thing, is that our research is only as good as the questions that we are asked. So, if you do have other questions that Sid and I have not covered today, something you'd love us to dig into, I would encourage anyone listening, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I would love to hear from you. Send me a direct message. I will always accept, because I'd love to hear, what are the burning issues? What are the burning questions that you have? Maybe there's something I can send you really quickly that we already have. But if not, I'd love to dig in.
Amanda, perfect way to end the episode. Thank you for the time, the information, the insights. Super excited to have you back as a second time. We may have to make this an annual event where you come back once a year and just update us, because value packed with information. So thank you so much for being here today. For all of you hanging out with us all this time today, thanks for hanging out with us. And we'll see you again in a couple of weeks. Take care, everyone.
Bye, everyone.